With the seemingly untimely departure of all-world running back Christian McCaffrey and wide receiver Robbie Anderson, the internet has been set ablaze with ideas and rumors about who will be the next Panther to go in this fire sale that is expected before the trade deadline. And out of nowhere, we got a gem dropped on us by ESPN's very own Adam Schefter, informing all of Panther Nation and the rest of the world that Brian Burns is not up for sale nor for trade, and in fact, the Carolina Panthers turned down 2 first-round picks from a suitor that was coming looking for Brian Burns' services. I'm going to tell you why that is, because I see a lot of people are kind of angry about that for some strange reason. But let's talk about it right after this.
I'm from the foe, you dig?
Welcome to The Way I See It. I am Jamario Rashad. This is a Carolina Panthers and Charlotte Hornet fan channel. Please do me a favor by hitting the like button and making sure you subscribe to the channel. I am on my road to 1,000 subs trying to get this channel monetized. And with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the crux of the video. Now, within this video, I am going to give a recap of the last 5 years of all the first round defensive ends as well as linebackers and compare them to our very own Brian Burns to show you why exactly trading him away for just 2 picks does not mean that we're going to adequately be able to replace him just because we got 2 random picks in this theoretical lottery. Now, first of all, we're going to go over the rookies that were drafted this year. To be fair, I am not going to dive into their production too much. They've not been able to put together a full season, not even a half a season yet, but I am able to give my opinion on them versus whether or not I would want them or Brian Burns. So as of right now, the best of this crop of players is Aiden Hutchinson. And just a little more bit of information, I am providing the PFF defensive grades for them as well as their sack numbers because I am looking at this from a pass rush perspective. So there's going to be a lot of linebackers that I'm not going to acknowledge and you're not going to see their numbers because Pro Football Focus does not consider them a pass rusher, meaning they may play a more traditional linebacking position, maybe in the middle or just dropping back into coverage a lot more than the guys that I am going to talk about. So just because their name appears, that does not mean that they're definitely accounted for when it comes to this video or this list, because Pro Football Focus does not consider those guys pass rushers. So with that being said, the best of this crop would have to be Aiden Hutchinson with a Pro Football Focus grade of 67.6, ranking 47th of 112 eligible pass rushers with 4.5 sacks. Although Aiden Hutchinson has a very bright future and he is going to be a star for the Detroit Lions, as of right now, I would have to choose my guy Brian Burns as being a player that is already established, going to be one of the only players on this list, one of the few players on this list that is actually voted by the NFL as well as his peers to the NFL Top 100 Players list, acknowledging that his game is recognized his game as a baller is recognized by all the other ballers around the NFL. So that's something that I have to take into account. So I cannot say that I would take any of these guys, Walker through Karlaftis, any of these guys taken in the first round, as well as the linebackers, who none of these guys over my guy Brian Burns. Now moving on to the 2021 draft class, the standout amongst the actual defensive ends would have to be the Miami Dolphins' Jalen Phillips. These are stats for what has been done so far this year. This is only his second year in the league, and he is one of the only players that we are going to highlight that actually does have a higher Pro Football Focus grade than Brian Burns. But that grade is not the sole reasoning or it's not going to be the only reasoning I use behind my opinion. There's going to be a myriad of things, mostly the eye test, because these numbers are backed up by second level things that me just looking at the game I could never identify, but I can tell you who is a baller. And Jalen Phillips is a baller, and he has the potential to eventually be Brian Burns and maybe potentially be even better. But as of right now, although his grade is higher, as a second year player on a Miami defense that is dominant pretty much in all phases, I cannot give him the grace of being a better player than Brian Burns. So all right, that just goes back to an entire draft class of defensive ends in 2021 that I would not take over Brian Burns. Now moving over to the linebackers on the other side, that goes without saying. Anybody in Panthers Nation knows that we would trade Brian Burns for Micah Parsons plus a first if we could. But Parsons is that guy. He is going to be dominant. He is dominant in this league moving forward. And I wouldn't come on here and be a fanboy and just lie to you and say that Brian Burns is as good as Micah Parsons. That is just a flat out lie. And then the second player down there, Jason Uwe, I think they call him something else up in Baltimore, but yeah, of course he is not anywhere near as good as my guy Brian Burns. Now let's move down to the 2020 draft class. We have of the defensive ends, we have Chase Young of the Washington Commanders and K'Lavon Chaisson. Chase Young has been a dominant player in the past, but he started this, I believe he tore his ACL and possibly sustained another injury over the offseason or preseason, possibly during earlier in the year. So as of right now, he is not currently ranked on this list by Pro Football Focus because he has not been on the field. Now, me being a football fan, I am gracious enough, or I am willing to admit that as a pure pass rusher, Chase Young may be a little bit better of a pure pass rusher than Brian Burns, but Brian Burns' versatility to actually be able to play that outside linebacking role, to get out in the flats and actually cover outside and actually provide things outside of just rushing the passer, is why I'm going to actually give the edge to Brian Burns and say that I believe personally for what our team does and what we need him to do, he is perfect. And more so, I wish we had somebody to complement him like Chase Young that was on the other side of the ball, similar to how we had another player that will be mentioned later on in this video. So with that being said, man, I believe that even in 2020, outside of potentially, and I'm going to put a caveat on that and say potentially just Chase Young, there were not any linebackers and or defensive ends that had the that were able to capture able to reach the heights, whether I say we're able to reach the heights that Brian Burns has been able to reach, or how I project them out to be in the future, because honestly, he is just as young as most of these guys. Like I said, this is the draft classes over the last 5 years, so the separation of these guys age-wise is 3 to 4 years maximum for a lot of these guys, depending on what age they went to college, if they did JUCO, all of those different things, man. So projecting out their progression is kind of a little bit simpler because of the age. Now moving on to the 2019 draft class. This draft class is absolutely loaded. All right, so like I can't lie, man. Of course, Nick Bosa is the absolute guy, man. I would be similar to Micah Parsons. He is just a slam dunk pick to be one of the top edge rushers in the league now and moving forward. And I would be a fool to say that Brian Burns is as good as this guy, because he just simply isn't. I know a lot of people out there would make the same case for Rashawn Gary and Montez Sweat once they look at their PFF grades and see that they are graded actually higher than Brian Burns, who is the 33rd best graded best pass rusher in the league out of 112 candidates. But with that being said, I would like to go back to, okay, Brian Burns is one of the only guys on this list that was actually voted to the NFL Top 100. Just like Nick Bosa is number 25, Brian Burns was voted number 76. Although that is in the later percentile of the top 100, let's just get it out of the way, man. Let's just say what it is. It's the top 100, and most of these guys in the league will never sniff the top 2 or 300. So with that being said, although these guys are having what looks to be slightly more productive years, I would say I would not trade my guy for either one of those guys, Rashawn Gary, Montez Sweat, and of course not Farrell or Collier. But now we have to move our attention over to the linebackers. Josh Allen, not the quarterback, the pass rushing linebacker. He has been absolutely electric down in Duval for the Jaguars. But I could not bring myself to say that he has been more effective than Brian Burns. Although he has been graded with a better defensive grade by Pro Football Focus, Brian Burns has had a higher sack production, and the Carolina Panthers themselves only have 10 sacks on the year. Brian Burns has accounted for 5 of those. If we take that in percentage-wise, it's half. That's 50% of the entire team's sack production. That's just irreplaceable. And like I said, he's also been recognized by his peers as being an absolute dog out there, man. So outside of Nick Bosa, I wouldn't take any of these guys, including Josh Allen, over Brian Burns right now. So moving on to the 2018 draft class, we have the Denver Broncos Bradley Chubb with a PFF grade of 81.9 with 5.5 sacks, and we have Marcus Davenport just a few spots behind Brian Burns at 36th. Bradley Chubb has been in the league for quite a while now, and I know that this can probably be said about a lot of players whenever they've been in tandem with other great players, but we have not seen him break out and hold his own in any way since the departure of Von Miller. And he being the younger of the two, it was projected that he was going to be able to grow and maybe be comparable in production to Von Miller, but even at Von Miller's advanced age for the NFL right now, he is still a much higher and much better pass rusher than Bradley Chubb, who has struggled to be the primary guy over there in Denver. Now, with this draft class, Pro Football Focus did not rank any of the linebackers that came out as pass rushers. So Bradley Chubb and Marcus Davenport are the only ones that I actually had to compare to and actually give my thoughts and opinions on if I think I would rather have them than Brian Burns. And the answer to that is, I'm pretty sure you can guess it, is absolutely not. And now we're going to move on to our final draft class that we're going to discuss in this video, and that being the 2017 draft class, highlighted by number 1 pick and former defensive player of the year, Myles Garrett, who is the number 1 graded pass rusher in the league right now at a 92.1. Like I said, he is first, and he has 6 sacks, which is only 1 more than Brian Burns. That's why I said that defensive grade is something. It's neat to look at. It's a number to consider. But when you look at the actual input out there on the game, or output, for statistics and impact, it may not always equate to the stat sheet. Myles Garrett being one of the only other players, Nick Bosa, Brian Burns, TJ Watt, as you can see down on the bottom of the screen, one of the only guys on this list that were included in the NFL Top 100. And of course I would take Myles Garrett over Brian Burns. There's not a soul who wouldn't, man. So we got Jonathan Allen down there, who was also included at number 88. He was not able to be ranked because he has been injured throughout this year. So that being a shame, but I wouldn't take him over my guy. I do want to make a slight caveat and say that Pro Football Focus, for some reason, does not consider Hassan Reddick to be a pass rusher, which I can say I'm not exactly sure why. I haven't intently watched the Eagles that much this year, but I can say last year when he was a Carolina Panther, he in tandem with Brian Burns were absolutely fire out there on the field. I believe he was able to put up about 12 sacks. But like I said, for the sake of the video right now, because of his position or whatever the politics are, he's not considered a pass rusher. So I will have to leave Hassan Reddick off the list. But finally, we got the guy TJ Watt, man. Defensive player of the year, came off the injury. I believe like 22 sacks last year. Absolute monster. Similar to Parsons, Garrett, Bosa. Of course, this guy is better than Brian Burns, man. Of course I would trade Brian Burns then some to get this guy on the team. But who wouldn't? I just think that's football. That's smart football, man. So final slide. In conclusion, out of the last 5 years, only 5 of 28 edge rushers drafted are better than Brian Burns. So ultimately, first round picks are not enough to ensure an adequate replacement for a guy that has been fired since the first time he stepped on the field with a Panthers uniform on. He is one of only 7 players included in this list on the NFL Top 100. And as I mentioned earlier, that staggering stat. The Carolina Panthers have 10 sacks, and Brian Burns is responsible for 5 of them. And with that being said, man, I am going to wrap it up there. Those are my opinions on why the Carolina Panthers chose to keep Brian Burns rather than trade him away for just 2 first-round picks. I think a lot of people hear first round and assume that they're going to be dynamite picks, that they always work out. But there are misses in each and every draft. I know that has to do with our scouting department. That would be another thing that's on us. But why give up a guy and then try to hopefully go out there and trade and draft somebody that can maybe one day be as good as he is? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, man. But with that being said, that is all I have on this. You all leave me your comments below. What do you all think about the rumors of this trade? What do you think about the Carolina Panthers turning down this trade and actually keeping Brian Burns? I think it was the right thing to do. What do you all think? Should they have let him go? Are there some dogs that you all would have liked to seen us go after in the draft this year? Whatever your thoughts are, man, make sure you leave them down below. Like the video, and if you've made it this far, that means that you rock with the content, so you should go ahead and subscribe, right? I would appreciate that. I am Jamario Rashad. This is The Way I See It, and I'm out. Peace.